NB LLC ZB-2018-14 site plan application, variance application for the construction of multi-family residential building at 30 Charles Street, lot 454, lot 32.0, zoning district C-2B. This is continued from the June 24th, 2019 meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, board members, professional staff. First of all, thank you for coming out on a miserable weather night. We were before you previously. We put on the testimony of Bob Kraus, our architect. As I indicated in my opening remarks that night, this is a unique property in that it has a non-conforming, non-conforming two-family use up front and an old industrial building in the rear that last was used as a bakery. The site has two principal structures, and they are...
Hi.
You're welcome.
Sorry.
Oh, no.
We'll just put on the record that Nancy.
Oh, here, sorry.
I'm going to wait until Nancy gets settled, if that's okay.
Have that one shot.
You know,
Nobody
the
saw that,
fastest
right?
presenter you have.
Okay, I'm settled.
All right, good. Okay. We were here once before, and we put the testimony on of Bob Kress, the architect. It's a unique property. It has a non-conforming two-family use up front, and it has an older industrial building in the rear that was last used as a bakery. Two principal uses on the site, and they are definitely not compatible. Everything on the site will be demolished, and in its place will be 6 residential units with parking at grade level and 3 apartments on the second floor and 3 apartments on the third floor. The use is conditionally permitted, but we are before you, the zoning board, because we do not meet several of the conditions. In addition, we require a nominal parking variance because we are 1 space short. I know I don't need to remind you that many of your approvals over the past several years have granted parking variances far in excess of that. We worked with your professionals more on this case than anyone I can recently remember. We made a significant number of revisions in response to the staff requests, the most important of which was to reduce the density from 8 units down to 6 units. We have 2 witnesses this evening. The first is Mike Marinelli from Menlo Associates, who is our engineer and whose office prepared the plans, and we have Foresight Planning and a planner who will justify the variances. Mr. Chairman, if you or any of the board members have any initial questions, I'll field them. Otherwise, we'll go right to the first witness.
Sure, I just want to ask anybody on the board, though, anyone on the board have a conflict with this application? No.
And those that were not here last time, did they listen to the tape?
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you.
We have a sign off on it.
And we're signing off as we speak.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We'll call Mike Marinelli, please.
Please state your name, spell your last name.
Sure, it's Michael Marinelli, Marinelli, of Menlo Engineering.
Mike, your credentials have been accepted by this board on numerous occasions in the past.
Yes, in fact, that was last month.
They haven't changed it.
They have not.
All right, we'll accept you as an next report.
Thank
Do
you.
you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may proceed.
Thank you.
Mike, did your firm prepare the engineering drawings that accompanied the application?
We did.
Have you visited the site, and are you familiar with it as well as familiar with the surrounding neighborhood?
I have on numerous occasions.
Do you have any familiarity with this city's zoning ordinance?
I do.
Okay. Please describe the property.
Sure, I'll refer quickly to the exhibit on the easel entitled 30 Charles Street Building, Block 454, Lot 32.01, 0.229 acres, existing conditions exhibit dated 5/20/19, because that was, I guess, the original date.
A4.
As A4. This exhibit is an aerial representation of the subject property. The property is in the middle of the exhibit, highlighted with a dark black line, highlighted in white highlight. The lot is designated as Block 454, Lot 32.01 on the tax map of the city of New Brunswick. The property is commonly known as 30 Charles Street, is located on the south side of Charles Street, which runs left to right on this exhibit, between Joyce Gilmer Avenue, which is just to the west, actually just west of this white structure you see on the left side of the exhibit, and Livingston Avenue is off to the east, off the picture. The property is 100 by 100 perfect square, or 10,000 square feet. Overall, it's approximately 0.23 acres and is located entirely within the C2B commercial zoning district. There is a zone boundary that runs down Charles Street. North of this site is the zone R6A, your R6A zone. As you can see from the exhibit, the surrounding uses on both the east, west, and south are primarily commercial. There's offices and retail and other offices here. Immediately across the street on the corner is a multi-family home. There's a small church. There's some single-family homes, and then there's some additional multi-family homes in this general vicinity. The site is in the existing condition consists of a two-family home that's on the Charles Street side, or the north side of the site. That is a two-story structure. And then on the rear of the site, or the south side of the site, is a two-story commercial structure with an appendage off to the east side. There are two access points to the site in existing condition, both on the eastern and westernmost property line. As you can see from this exhibit, the entire property is developed basically edge to edge. There's a small planting strip that is on the west side between the existing commercial space and the existing structures. These two structures that I noted are not conforming in many ways. The single-family residential home is not a conforming use. It's also over the setback in the front yard. The commercial property is a conforming use. However, it's over the setback line for both side and rear yard. So the structures that we're taking out are non-compliant in the existing condition. Now, if I may refer to my second exhibit, number A5.
Prepared by your office,
That is correct.
as was A4.
It was. This plan is entitled Site Plan Exhibit, dated 5/20/2019. This is the same error representation you saw in Exhibit A4. The difference being we've rendered the submitted site plans without any changes, just colorized it so I can describe it. It also has the landscape turned on so that you can see what's being proposed with respect to buffering. So the applicant, as I said, proposes to remove all existing improvements on site and construct a new state-of-the-art apartment building. This apartment building will be 3 stories. The first story of which is understory parking and ancillary uses to the structure. And I'm sure the architect went through some of it, but I'm just going to provide a little bit of detail myself. We provided for a bicycle room. A lot of people in New Brunswick do use that type of transportation, so we've provided a storage space for that. We've also provided a first floor space for refuse and recycling, so that they have an area inside the building to store it, so it's not outside and visible to the neighbors. There are 2 access points via a front lobby, an emergency egress via stairs in both the front and rear of the property, as well as an elevator that can be utilized. Lastly, there are 2 other spaces on the first floor, including a tenant storage space and the utility or maintenance portion storage, so that the building super has a place to store all of his equipment. In all, so the second story then is apartments, and the third story is also apartments. On each of those floors, there are three apartments, 2 bedrooms each. This building conforms with the bulk variances for setback, as well
standards.
The bulk standards for setback, floor area ratio, building coverage, impervious coverage. So it meets all of those criteria as is dictated by the bulk standard.
FAR as well.
That's correct.
Okay.
What we proposed is to eliminate the westernmost driveway, so that curb cut will no longer be there. There'll be one less access onto Charles Street on the north, and maintain the easternmost as a 2-way full access drive that services 2 external parking spaces and 9 understory parking spaces underneath the apartments. Again, this single access drive accesses all 11 parking spaces, including an ADA space that is immediately available next to the elevator or front lobby of the proposed structure. We've also provided new sidewalks along the entire frontage and access to both the front door and storage areas, as well as the back door or emergency access out to the main parking lot. All of these sidewalks are also ADA compliant in their design. With respect to stormwater management, we are actually reducing the amount of impervious coverage on site. We also don't trigger the stormwater management rule because we're under an acre of total disturbance and well under a quarter acre of new impervious coverage. All utilities are existing and available along Charles Street, so that any new services will go out to Charles Street via underground conduit.
No.
This would include sewer, water, electric, gas, telephone, and all necessary utilities for this structure. This site does reside in the flood hazard zone. The stream is just to the northwest here. However, all of the livable space is well above that flood hazard elevation. And the structure is elevated compared to the buildings to both this north, south, and west. As far as landscape goes, we provided for 11 new shade trees, 3 ornamental trees, 44 evergreen trees, and 47 shrubs, as well as ground plantings to dress up the surrounding areas. Buffering on all sides, as you can see in this exhibit. Although we've provided a total of 14 shade trees on site, a few ornamentals and some deciduous, it doesn't meet the city's ordinance requirement for tree replacement. We're technically three trees deficient, but the applicant will be willing to contribute to the fund should they gain their approval this evening. With respect to lighting, the understory parking will be lit with ceiling-mounted lights that will light the parking area in conformance with the code. With respect to the site plan, we're only proposing one building-mounted light on the western facade that will actually adequately light the entire accessway from Charles Street to the rear parking area. That proposed light has an average of 1 foot candle a minimum foot candle of 1 with an average of 4.5 foot candles. That building mounted light is also not very high. It's only 12 feet in elevation, so it's not super high. It's going to glare to neighboring properties. I believe that's it with respect to the site plan. If the board has any questions related to the site plan, I can answer them, or I can move into the variance requests we have this evening.
Signage?
We're not proposing any signage as part of this application.
Just the number of the building.
That's correct. The number obviously is to identify the proposed structure as 30 Charles.
And an NJDEP permit will be required in Newman?
It will. We actually require a flood hazard application permit as well as a DRCC permit approval. So those two will be required as a condition of the approval.
And there was a prior NJDEP permit?
There was. In fact, there was an application before the board not that long, a couple of years ago, where they were trying to expand the bakery. And as part of that application, the applicant actually received a flood hazard application permit for that addition to the existing structure, but we'd have to supply a new permit application for the new structure.
Okay, let's touch on the variances.
Sure. I will list them briefly. We do have a planner here to justify, but I'll give a little bit of background on the proposed variances. Again, this is a use, mid-rise apartment that is conditionally permitted within the zoning ordinance. However, we don't meet some of those conditions. One of those conditions is lot area. It requires a lot area of 1 acre. Again, this is only a 10,000 square foot lot, so it's only 0.23. So we're seeking relief from that. As you can see, there's existing development on the property line on all 3 sides. There's no available land immediately adjacent to this in order to expand upon and bring this lot into conformance. We're also seeking a density variance. This type of use permits 16 units per acre, where we're providing 27 units per acre. Again, it's only 6 units, but because the lot is only 10,000 square feet, it triggers that density variance. Buffering, a 20-foot buffer is required around this site, so if you were to provide that 20-foot buffer on all 3 sides, it would render the site useless. But what we have done is provided as much of the buffering as we can. As you can see, I'm referring to Exhibit A4. There isn't any buffer in the existing condition, and it's surrounded by commercial properties. So there's really nothing to buffer to. But we have done our best to supplement or add additional landscaping that doesn't exist today, including, as I said, shade trees, evergreen trees, evergreen shrubs, and buffer it to the best of our ability. Again, it's surrounded by commercial property, so I think that should be taken into consideration with respect to the buffering. We are requesting a parking variance. For the 6 units, 12 parking spaces would be required, and we've only provided 11. Again, this area is in a commercial area with ample access to both mass transit. There's several bus stations, access to retail centers, and as I stated in my direct, we've provided for a bicycle room to offset that for the tenants who may be using that type of transportation and offset that 1 space variance. I know that this board has granted other parking variances in the past. And finally, loading. Because it's a commercial space, 1 loading space is technically required, but this is a residential apartment, and there's only 6 units, so the need for a full-time loading space we don't think is necessary. We have not provided one. The intention is not to have big trucks coming and going. The most they would get is a UPS or FedEx on a regular basis, and then they'll park like they do for any of the other. They'll probably park at a centralized location and deliver to several houses at the same time. And I don't see that being any different in this particular case. We've provided for mailboxes exterior to the building, so both the mailman and the deliveries can be made outside the building. Again, I didn't mention this building is going to be a secure building. There will be either punch code or swipe card in order to gain access into the building. There will also be closed circuit television for security reasons for both the safety of the patrons and to keep an eye on the understory parking, as well as the rear of the structure, because it's kind of sandwiched between this proposed use and the commercial use to the south.
Mike, have you had an opportunity to review the Delaware review letter, which is dated March 20, 2019?
I have, and we've had the opportunity to reply to a lot of DNR's letter. I believe the latest letter, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, is March 20th of 2019. Mm-hmm. I believe this letter, if you see, most of it is struck through because we provided a lot of this information already. There are a few items that are still outstanding, including outside agency approvals, which I already discussed, a sanitary sewer report, which of course we could provide. So I've reviewed this letter and can agree in testimony to comply with it in its entirety.
All right. Have you had an opportunity to review the Bidwell planning report dated June 20?
I have.
Mr. Chairman, as we customarily do, we would move to the planning review comments, which is paragraph 10, and it's located on page 5. And between Mr. Marinelli and I will take you through. 10A, Mike has already testified as to which governmental approvals we need to obtain, and we will certainly obtain them and agree that they are a condition of approval. With regard to item 10B, the revised architectural elevations were the subject of Mr. Krause's testimony when we were last before you. He indicated the changes that we made to try and give this more of a residential look, which is what the TAC was looking for, and he described the building materials as well. With regard to item 10C, you're going to hear testimony from the planner to justify the density variance, and I've made this comment many times. This city is not wary of density variances. It's actually part of their plan for the revitalization of this city. With regard to item 10D, the outstanding trees we believe are 3, and as Mike indicated, we will contribute to the city tree fund. With regard to lighting, I believe we have now had the testimony from Mr. Kraus. He answered the lighting question with respect to making sure that it's a safe and secure place since it's, grade parking. We also have to explain the rooftop solar array, and with respect to that, the owner is seeking an energy efficient and environmentally friendly building. The roof plan represents the maximum number of solar panels that could be put on it, but the most important thing is all of those panels will be below the parapet so that we're not going to have any visual issue there. All right? Like anything else, once the solar contractor comes out, okay, and gets an actual firm plan, we'll probably end up with less solar panels, but no one's going to see them in any event. I believe that covers that report. That concludes his direct testimony. He's available if you have any questions.
Any member of the board have questions?
All right, we'll call the next witness.
Please state your name, spell your last name.
James Clarkin, C-L-A-R-K-I-N.
You swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You've been before this board before, correct?
Yes, I have.
Have your credentials changed at all?
They have not.
Well, that's a good day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Have you had the opportunity to review the application, the engineering plans, and the reports from the board's professionals?
Yes, I have.
Have you also inspected the property as well as the surrounding neighborhood?
I have.
Okay, and you heard Mr. Marinelli's testimony with respect to what is located on the property today?
I did, and I concur with what is there today.
Thank you. Okay, briefly, so that everybody understands the basis for your testimony, please repeat what is being proposed on site.
So we are proposing a 3-story low-rise apartment building structure with parking on the first floor, 3 units on the second floor, 3 units on the third floor for a total of 6, each unit will have 2 bedrooms. Other improvements are the 2-way driveway on the east side of the property, landscaping around, the lighting which engineer testified towards, the bicycle storage, and then finally solar panels on the roof.
And are you familiar with the city's ordinance and its master plan?
I am.
And the zone that the property is located in?
It is the C2B commercial district.
And is the low-rise use that they are proposing a conditionally permitted use in that zone?
It is a conditional use, yes.
Okay. And what variances will this applicant need in order to construct the project?
So the variance that is needed with respect to the conditional use is the D3 variance for deviations from the standard or specification within your zoning code for the C2B commercial zone. Specifically, there are 3 deviations that we're seeking. Minimum lot size, it's an acre required. This is only 10,000 square feet. 2 is the maximum density. 16 is the max unit per acre permitted on the property. We're seeking 27, and then finally a landscaping buffer is required. That's 20 feet, and given the small size of the property, ours will be significantly less.
And we certainly need a parking variance, correct?
That is correct. We also need a parking variance. We are 1 space short of the RSIS requirements for parking
Okay.
for the use.
All right. And with respect to design relief, the loading space, we have none, correct?
No loading space. Other design standard relief includes a curb cut setback. 10 is required from the property line, where we are proposing 5, and then a couple of landscaping design standards that we cannot meet that I'll get into in a bit.
All right. Now, even though these conditions are not met, have you formed a professional opinion, okay, whether this site can accommodate the proposed development?
I have, and it is my professional opinion that the site can accommodate the proposed development. So starting with the lot size, I believe this site has been excellently designed to be very concise, fit almost all the required parking, all the proposed units that the applicant would like onto the 10,000 square foot site, even though an acre is required. But really, it's the concise nature and good design that is allowing the site to accommodate this proposed development. Also, we have no other setback or coverage variances needed. The building height conforms, the floor area ratio conforms. So it's really just because of this 100 by 100 lot that we need to seek this deviation from your conditional use standard. And really, the building is more the design of a single-family home than a long, large, tall apartment building. So I feel that it both fits in the neighborhood, but by virtue of that design, it can fit, and therefore the site can accommodate the proposed development. And as was alluded to before, it was originally proposed to be 8 units. We cut that down to 6 units, and therefore 12 parking spaces are required. We're only proposing 11, but that represents a far higher percentage of the required parking when compared to other applications that this board has seen. For many reasons, most notably, especially for apartment buildings, the car ownership rates are typically much lower than they are for single-family homes. So 2 parking spaces is more than enough, and we almost provide that. But you also have public transportation options. There are ride-sharing services for like Uber and Lyft. We have the bicycle storage room. I believe that 11 spaces will be more than sufficient. Moving on to the second deviation for the maximum density. Once again, the building is excellently designed. It really takes advantage of putting most of the parking on the first floor, so that it really fits within the small, concise area of the lot. And it easily accommodates all 60 units plus all the necessary amenities that one would expect for modern rental family housing. And then finally, for the landscape buffer, landscaping has been provided as Mr. Marinelli showed, and shows so well in his site plan. You have large trees on the side, front, and back, and I really believe that meets the intent of your C2P commercial zone with respect to landscaping. So we may not meet the size of the landscaping buffer, but we certainly meet its intent, in my professional opinion.
Do you have an opinion whether any of the goals and objectives of New Jersey municipal land use law would be furthered if this application were granted?
I do believe that, most specifically purposes E and I. E is promoting the establishment of an appropriate population density that will contribute to the neighborhood and community, or providing needed rental housing in a neighborhood that has similar apartment complexes, both directly across the street and a little bit further down the street. When I looked at the site, I took note, I saw about 6 to 8 units in those apartment buildings, so those house larger densities than what is proposed here. So therefore, I feel that those being equal or more density, that our proposed development can be handled, and it is an appropriate population density. And then purpose I is promoting a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design. As I said, this is very well designed, very creative to put the parking on the first floor and be able to still fit, you know, the 6 units on the second and third floors and fitting everything that you need, the mailroom, all those amenities.
All right, with respect to the parking variance, how can that be justified?
So I believe it can be justified through the C2 flexible variance, or bulk variance rather. It can be granted in that we are almost providing 2 spaces per unit. And kind of repeating what I said before, you have many other transportation options through public transportation, ride-sharing services, the bicycle storage. Also, with ride-sharing, just both family and college student vehicle ownership rates have really gone down. So I feel that providing 11 is more than sufficient, even though it's 1 space short of the RSIS. And it's furthering the same purposes of the municipal land use law for design and parking layout and population densities. And finally, the benefits from this project substantially outweigh any possible detriment for being just 1 space short.
All right, let's talk about the negative criteria, both with respect to the conditional D3 variance as well as the parking variance. All right, can we meet each of the 2 legs of the negative criteria?
Yes, we can. The only potential negative consequence would be for the parking, but just from my prior testimony and for all the reasons I just mentioned, I feel that it should not be an issue for this neighborhood or just this application all by itself.
All right, can you give an opinion of whether the granting of these variances will have any substantial impairment to the city's zone plan and zoning ordinance?
I believe absolutely no impairment, much less a substantial detriment, or impairment rather. The use is conditionally permitted. It's just these 3 deviations, which I feel the site can more than accommodate. And the scope of the relief for the parking variance is nominal, 1 space.
In summary, what's your opinion of the project?
The positives from this development significantly outweigh any negatives, as we're providing an upgrade to the site and neighborhood for modern rental housing, which this neighborhood may need, or does need rather. I see no negatives or detriment to the site or neighborhood, much less a substantial detriment.
Last question, with respect to the design waivers, can these be granted without any detriments and still promoting public safety?
Yes, I don't believe they would cause any detriment by being granted.
Thank you. That concludes his testimony. He's available.
Any board member have any questions? Seeing none?
That concludes our direct votes, Mr. Chairman. We are, we'll make a statement if there's anyone from the public. Otherwise, I'll rest.
At this time, I'd like to open it up to the public. Any member of the public that has any questions or comments, please come forward. Come forward, John.
Please state your name, spell your last name.
Charles Cradwell, K-R-A-T-O-V-I-L.
You swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
You may proceed.
Good evening, members of the board. Would like to ask, for starters, the LLC, Charles Street NB LLC, who's behind that?
Well, if you were to examine the application submission that was filed, you would see there's a corporate disclosure statement.
And since I haven't received those documents, could you tell me?
Yes.
Thank
At the end of your discussion.
you. Okay, we'll see why I can't know before my comments are made, but I'll follow up after the meeting for that. The only other question, I might have missed it, is the impervious coverage, does it increase or decrease?
Mike?
It does decrease, but I don't have the report with me that itemizes those numbers. As you can see from the existing condition, there's only a small green area along the western facade. In the proposed condition, there's actually green on all 4 facades now.
So there'll actually be more
More grass.
to absorb the rain. That's great, because I know it does sometimes flood this area. That's all. I wish the applicant all the best.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public have any questions, comments? Seeing none, we'll close the public portion.
Mr. Chairman, we recognize you don't have a full set of members, but with the 6 members all eligible to vote, we will take the vote. Please.
Sure. For discussion, before we get into anything? Good,
It sounds good.
Looks good.
Okay.
Conditions?
Sure, and Mr. Chairman, I do have certifications from Mr. Adorno, Mr. Zimmerman, and Ms. Coppola. So, I presume the other board members are eligible to vote.
Yes.
Okay. So, the board acts favorably. Recommended conditions of approval would include compliance with the terms of the DNR engineering report dated March 20th, 2019, submission of all necessary easements and/or cross-access agreements for review and approval by the board attorney and city engineer, payment of a site performance bond in an amount reviewed and approved by the city engineer, submission of site inspection escrow deposits for engineering inspection fees in an amount calculated pursuant to ordinance, payment of all water sewer connection fees to the city engineer, issuance of a road opening permit from the city engineer if required, compliance with the terms of the Bignell Planning Consultants Report dated June 20th, 2019, monetary contribution to the city's tree preservation trust fund in an amount to be determined by ordinance, planning review escrow fund for all anticipated post-approval reviews, payment of any outstanding taxes, water, sewer, or any other fees to the city of New Brunswick, Middlesex County Planning Board approval or waiver, a DNR Canal Commission approval of Freehold Soil Conservation District, issuance of a flood hazard permit from the NJDEP, submit engineering site plan to comply with any changes required by the planning or engineering memos or plan amendments offered at the hearing, submit architectural plans to comply with any changes required by the planning or engineering memos offered at the hearing. All utilities and other site improvements to be maintained by the applicant at their sole expense. All on-site utilities to be constructed underground. All temporary encroachments to the public right-of-way shall require city council approval. All construction staging shall be done on-site unless an encroachment allowed into the public right-of-way is approved by the city council. Streets shall be kept clean of sediment and debris. The applicant shall cause the streets to be cleaned if directed to do so by the Director of Public Works. Tracking pads shall be installed at all construction exits. Replacement of any damaged streets, curbs, and sidewalks as per the direction of the city engineer. Variances are for conditional use, relief for loading, driveway location, landscaping planting requirement. The last two are design waivers.
Parking. Parking. Yeah.
Parking involved, that's right.
I do have one question. So
Certainly.
you said it was a secure building, that you needed a key card or something to
Yes,
get
that's
in.
correct.
What about the parking? Is that as well? Is it secure or
No,
is it
it's
just?
open, it's
open.
opened, yeah. So the
Okay.
driveway, there's an opening under the building that cars free flow, but there will be closed caption cameras monitoring that.
Okay,
And the lighting was upgraded because that, we wanted to make sure it would not be a concern.
okay, thank you.
Based on that, you need to go back up to public, see if there are any comments on that one question.
Sorry.
Okay, at this point in time, I'd like to open it up to the public. Any member of the public have any questions or comments on the comment?
On my little question.
Seeing none, I'll close the public portion. So, do we have a motion?
Second.
Oh, it was an item of order. That was the motion. And the second was?
Charlie McNair,
Yes.
Nancy Coppola,
Yes.
Doug Sheehan. Yes. John Zimmerman,
Yes.
Ivan Adorno. Yes. John Cox.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Good night.